10 out of 10. A Letter to Momo is a surprisingly quiet and humane movie. You look at the box and it's got these 3 obnoxious monsters in this weird fun pose, and then you watch it and this generational divide is immediately established in the film. Momo is brought to a part of Japan where kids her own age appear exceptionally rare, and this isolation is further reinforced by her first encounter with any inhabitants on the island. Her grandparents, while no doubt beloved, could never take the place of any friends she might have once had before she came here. This is something that her mother is no doubt aware of, as once they find somebody the same age as Momo, she immediately forces them together, much to the disgust of Momo. Her mother's actions, while well intended, only led to Momo feeling even more isolated. Momo's reaction to the other children could only be described as fear. With so few surrounding allies for her to have, the few people in this new life that she could potentially relate to means that much more to her, so the idea of not befriending them seems that much more terrible. There is no backup option. This is probably why she didn't jump off the bridge. The film never explicitly says so, but it's readily apparent that she doesn't want to be seen as a coward, so she acts as if the jump is beneath her and moves on. This is why the yokai are such an important aspect of Momo's growth. I don't particularly like the term coming of age film, as what defines coming of age seems fairly arbitrary, but considering how much focus is put on her maturing as a character, it seems to be the only fitting term here, and the yokai definitely help her grow. These creatures are nothing more than rowdy troublemakers, but for somebody whose life is as mundane as Momo's, she needs the thrill that these guys force on her. Also, the small one's a real cutie in a kind of repulsing way. The inclusion of the supernatural in an otherwise slice-of-life setting does lead to several fairly obvious comparisons that one could make, but I find that Wolf Children just makes the most sense, partly because it came out a few months after this film, but for the most part I feel the thematic contrast leads to an interesting comparison. Sure, in both films a single mother and her children move to bumfuck nowhere with supernatural events occurring in an otherwise mundane story, but that's really where the comparison ends. For instance, while Momo is initially terrified of the yokai, Hana immediately accepts the potentially terrifying because she knows that it will lead her to a better life. And while sure, you could look at the supernatural elements literally, I much prefer viewing them as metaphors. In Wolf Children's case, they represent the anxiety one might have in the unknown world of parenthood, while in A Letter to Momo they represent the unknown world of adolescence. In both scenarios, my interpretations of what the supernatural's presence means revolves around the age of the characters, which is why I find that the characters' reactions to the supernatural so interesting. Hana, as a grown woman, has matured enough to accept the unknown as a part of her life. Momo, still a child, needs somebody to give her a helpful nudge, whether it's her mother forcing her to talk with a complete stranger, or the yokai forcing her into the water when she's too scared to take the dive herself. Immaturity is also essential to understanding the final conflict of the film, which, without spoiling too much, revolves around Momo childishly clinging to the past, while her mother races towards the future. Both parties have a lot more in common with each other than either of them is aware of, but they never revealed anything to the other party. This is what led to the emotional climax of the film, regardless of what the yokai did leading up to the event. They just triggered the inevitable in order to help both Momo and her mother grow as people and deepen their relationship with one another. The end result of this maturation is summed up simply and effectively in the final shots of the film. Momo is finally, without anyone else to guide her in any way, able to jump into the water and deal with the uneasiness of her adolescence. 8 out of 10. This video is the third in a series of daily uploads where I review some movies I missed over the last decade in the hopes of making the ultimate anime of the decade list. If you have any suggestions for any anime, film or TV, released from 2011 to 2020, please tell me in the comments. I want to find out about it now as opposed to after I make the big ass video. Also, I'm going to say some cringy sellout shit, and tomorrow's film is Saint Young Men if you want to watch it in advance. See you then.